Big Séance Podcast, Episode 34. Welcome to the Big Séance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance. Well, hello there. Did you miss me? So much has changed since we last chatted a month and a half ago. I probably owe you a bit of an explanation. We are finally moved into a new, beautiful home, which also means that I'm recording this from a new and improved studio. But that's not all of the changes. I'm not sure how many people will notice, but I've upgraded all of my recording equipment as well, which takes some time to figure out and adjust to. So feel free to let me know what you think, or if you even hear a difference. But all of these changes, added to the normal stress of the end of the school year, most of you know I'm a teacher, really knocked me out of the game for much longer than I thought it would. But I'm back, and with a solo episode today. A little later, I have a few shout-outs for some listeners, and yes, we'll also talk about this Charlie challenge business, and I'll tell you whether I've tried it or not. How's that for a tease? But first, back in April, I was honored to be visited by two high school seniors who traveled from an hour away to meet me. They wanted to chat and interview me on the topic of the paranormal, but specifically about the subculture of the paranormal. Fascinating, right? I recorded the very cool 2.5-hour discussion with Rick and Daniel, and actually they recorded our whole conversation too, which was funny. But here's how they described the class and their research project to me, including an explanation of Tendencies, which piqued my interest. I'd never heard of such a class or project. I thought it was so cool. This was about an hour into our meeting. There's, kind of the...
Yeah, I was gonna...
Tools.
Is there anything else you think we need for our observation-wise?
We have a lot of tendencies. That was really helpful. We really covered that in the beginning.
Yeah. Explain that. What's that?
In the subculture, it's just like with one of my friends, they're doing the Amish. Mm-hmm. So they're doing specific things that they do that other people won't do. Like they don't let people take pictures of them because it's against their religion in a sense. Couldn't exactly explain it. And just certain little tendencies they have, like how they act around people that may be outside their specific subculture when they're acting on it. And what we've kind of seen,
just in ways, whenever you were talking about how different groups interact with each other, how some get competitive, how some are more skeptical, how the personalities of different groups, and whenever you explain that, and
people's thoughts with money and how that...
See, I'd never even heard of that class. I was like, shut up, that's cool. Ethnography? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's an ethnography project.
That's cool. I'd never even heard of that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's for our cool English class.
So is this your research project? I used to have, when I was in high school, it was the research.
Yeah. We've had a research paper, and this is kind of ties into that, actually going out and getting your own sources and doing outside research past just online and in books you get in the library. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, just the way members of the group, the way they act, the way they just interact with everything, and just different tendencies that they have while doing things. So, yeah, that was definitely really helpful.
Well, cool.
Different things that you said about that, different ways.
And we got some the folklore. That was one of the things we covered, folklore behind it, the stories.
So no pressure, right? I was representing all of us in the paranormal subculture. You're welcome. Actually, they did find a few other people to talk to for their research, including someone at the famous Lemp Mansion here in St. Louis. But how cool is that? I was honestly a little nervous, but these young men were so incredibly respectful, mature, and they had clearly put a lot of effort into their research. So I thought the podcast was the perfect forum to share just a few moments from our conversation, but also an excuse to share a creepy story and a few EVP samples. One thing that I was curious about was that for the most part, these guys grew up right in the middle of the paranormal craze that we're still in now. Is talking about or having an interest in the paranormal just normal for them? Do they even pay much attention to it? Here's what they had to tell me.
Now, maybe to give you some feedback, I know they're like, okay, I personally have some thoughts or whatever just from watching shows or just anything. So I have my kind of thoughts or whatever. Like you said, young people might have their thoughts, and I know there's like, we had a group of people and like, okay, who wants to do different subcultures, who wants to do the Amish, who wants to do this, who wants to do paranormal, and we were us three. Well,
so paranormal was automatically thrown out as a
Daniel, Ryan, our other guy, and I were all like, yeah, for sure, we want to do that one. And then it was like, like it'd be cool, but like, I don't know, they weren't like as interested in it. So like maybe with it being around, and for sure, like there's many times we'll like hang out, be like late at night or whatever at a friend's house or whatever, and we'll just be like chilling and just talking about just different thoughts like that.
We've had a couple hour long conversation about
deep
like,
conversation.
About like
life.
It was like paranormal.
No, I mean like,
so like
around 2 o'clock in the morning, just sitting around for hours, a couple hours, just talking about paranormal stuff and all. And I love
what started it for you guys.
The intro, it's really it just intrigues the crap out of me.
For me, it's always like it's kind of been and like just a couple stories that go around. There's a house a few miles away from my house that's always been said to be haunted, and like 4 guys have died there. And crazy stories you hear, just kind of the folklore that you hear behind it. You wonder if it's true or not. And me personally, live in an over 100-year-old house. I mean, you kind of just wonder some nights when you hear stuff, you don't really know what's going on.
I mean, there's times we'll be hanging, and like once ghost stories get going, like I know a few stories that I've heard from people close to me, and then like a couple other friends know some stories that they heard from people that are close to them. We start telling stories, and then like
it's an interesting.
I love it. Like whenever my hairs stand up a little bit, and I just get it going, and then whenever we got the chance to study this group and maybe even get to go on an investigation of our own, it was like, we've got it. Like, this would be great. We've got to do it.
So I established that I was talking to fellow paranerds. So he talked about being an open-minded skeptic, the scientist's view of the paranormal, parapsychology, the other side, the experiences that got us involved in the paranormal, and my work with EVP or electronic voice phenomena. An important detail that these boys may have decided to make note of in their research is that they actually struggled to get a hold of many people in this paranormal subculture who were willing to help them out. What they were really hoping to be able to do was follow a group of investigators during an investigation. Since my team is currently inactive, and since I don't do much investigation on my own, the only thing I could offer them was this meeting. But I did try to connect them to other groups in the area. There are many, and there are lists of groups and directories. But it seems many people just didn't get back to them, or perhaps there weren't many investigations scheduled this spring, or I think in some cases, the groups just no longer exist, which is common with a lot of smaller paranormal teams that may have started as a fad and then faded fast. And I suppose, in a way, my team is one of those. But their struggle to find help surprised me. And at the same time, it didn't. I'm a teacher, and I work with young people every day. but I don't often get the opportunity to have these paranormal discussions with students. So I jumped at the opportunity to at least sit down and talk to Rick and Daniel. They actually had a third group member, Ryan, but he wasn't able to make it to our meeting. Hi, Ryan. Interestingly enough, one of the questions they asked me was...
So
Things like
overall,
that.
like the culture itself, it's very interactive among all. Would you say, or would you say it's more towards like staying in your group and occasional interaction, or is the entire community pretty?
I think probably in general, outside of me, I'm probably not very typical. I don't jump out there and find places. I don't.
And no, I've never felt like the typical member of this subculture. I'd love to know how you would describe where you fit into the paranormal subculture. We talked about the concept of paranormal unity, or para-unity, that is sometimes talked about and sometimes criticized among paranormal teams and researchers. And what does it say about our subculture that these guys found it so difficult to find people willing to help them out with their research? Our discussion also included some of the experiences I had over the 2 or 3 year period that I was active with my paranormal investigation group, the Missouri Spirit Seekers, as well as some of my other nerdy experiments and research. I was kind of hoping that they'd let me show off some of my EVP clips, and they did. As you'll hear from their responses, I think it was one of the cooler parts of the night for them. So the first EVP I played for them is one I don't think I've shared with listeners of the podcast yet. I'll play it for you first so that you can hear it clearly. Then I'll jump back to the audio with Rick and Daniel. This EVP clip is from an undisclosed family residence investigation. This was one that friend and psychic medium Marilyn Painter asked me to help her with. I record nonstop from the moment I arrive at a location, so we, along with the family, were around the dining room table, which was our command center for the evening, and I was finishing up with the equipment set up. I asked one of the family members if there were plenty of outlets downstairs in the basement. To maintain their privacy, I bleeped out the family member's quick response, but right after that, listen to the voice that was captured.
There's probably plenty of outlets downstairs. There's probably plenty of outlets downstairs. There's probably plenty of outlets downstairs.
Did you hear "See Dorothy"? I wish I would have known that night to look out for a Dorothy down in the basement, but I didn't find this EVP till days later, and that's usually how it goes. Okay, back to my discussion with Rick and Daniel. You'll hear the same "See Dorothy" EVP with their response.
So I just bleeped that out, but then you'll hear the EVP after that.
There's probably plenty of outlets downstairs.
Did you hear the whisper? I was talking about going downstairs and placing recorders down there, and then it sounds to me like somebody saying "See Dorothy."
I definitely did.
Yeah, so after that we were like, is there Dorothy downstairs? Is that who we're going to see?
Outlets downstairs.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, and I have most EVPs sound.
And you didn't hear that until afterwards.
Right. Had no clue.
Then I played my very favorite and first big EVP ever captured. It was captured at one of our first investigations at Friedens United Church of Christ in St. Charles, Missouri. I featured a lengthy commentary on this EVP in episode 6 of the podcast from July 30th, 2014. So if you'd like to hear more about it, check out that link in the show notes. But I will go ahead and play the amplified version of this EVP for you now.
Side of the fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers. go to the center, it's like
Side of the fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
and then you go to the center, it's like
Side of the fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
and then you go to the center, it's like
Now back to listening to this clip with Rick and Daniel.
Side of the fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
and then you go to the center, it's like
That's what? No way.
Now wait, before I
That's crazy.
play more, would you hear any message yet? Like,
I haven't heard what it said.
I just heard like a little
heard-
girl whispering.
Yeah,
okay.
it sounded.
But you don't hear any words yet? Okay. But different people hear it's all over. Some people hear this is Paul, and then some people hear it's all over me. Or it could be nothing. It could be somebody's shoe squeaking, walking and turning on this kind of floor.
Play it again.
You know.
Fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
And these are just unidentified sounds from the kitchen.
I heard it's all over me. That's
I can
See,
hear.
but now that I've told you,
Yeah.
is your brain forcing yourself to hear that, or do you really think that's what it is?
I heard the it's for the first time, so you can definitely tell that sounded like a voice to me. Side of the fellowship hall,
This is what makes you obsessed with it.
opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
and then you go to the center, it's like
I can definitely hear that.
That's really creepy. That's
And the
awesome.
next one's even creepier because when I slow it down, the voice sounds lower. But you know, it's
Side of the fellowship hall, opposite of the kitchen, it's higher numbers.
and then you go to the center, it's like
Another one of the questions the boys asked me was one of the most common questions I hear in our subculture, and a question I get asked a lot.
What we're also kind of talking about is from the research we did, it's like the ghost being tied to the area specifically, or like if they're still going to be there when the building's torn down, or if it's just gone once the building's gone, like it's kind of moved on, like their purpose was done in a sense.
people talk about Earthbound Spirits a lot, and a lot of people have categories of ghosts. Like
Again,
they'll have a category
what do you
of
think?
Spirit.
So back to our conversation. They were asking me about attachments.
I've had a few of those kind of things going on.
Really?
But I would never say, "Ugh, that's demons," and I must be, but I haven't experienced it. At some point, if I ever experience something crazy like that, then I would never.
So you've never personally had an attachment? Or you have?
Okay, I'll tell you this.
Because I love just hearing stories. So
You do?
If you have time to just tell
All right, well, let me
stories,
bust a good one out for you.
I love stories.
It's the best.
I had.
So I'll actually retell this story here, because frankly, I'm sure you'd rather hear it in this nice new microphone. It is a story that I actually had the opportunity to share with the listeners of Jim Harold's Campfire podcast, which I know many of you are fans of. But this actually happened in 2012, and I talked about it in a blog post, so some of you who have followed me for a while may remember reading about it. It actually happened only days after the investigation that captured the See Dorothy EVP that you heard just a few minutes ago. But it was also a time period in which I was very heavily involved in some other paranormal experiments as well, including a séance that we held the very evening just before I had this experience. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a racing heartbeat. There was a chill in the air. It seemed cold. and I don't know how else to explain just how I knew there was a presence with me close by in the room. And I was frightened. I was lying on my left side, and the edge of the bed was to my back. As I was lying there silently, trying to figure out what these feelings were and what was going on, suddenly I felt a hand reach over and grab my right shoulder, giving me a quick shove. My instinct was to grab for the hand, which felt cold. I'm fairly confident I didn't see the hand, but in my mind's eye, the hand was very dark and black. Just imagine a creepy, scary hand, and that was it. As quickly as it arrived, though, it retreated back over the edge of the bed, just as I grabbed for it. I turned over, now lying on my back. Since my partner was asleep and we had guests in another bedroom, I was worried about making any noise. If it weren't for that, I probably would have begun questioning my visitor out loud instantly. But I did grab my cell phone, and I held it out in front of me, and I just recorded. I very quietly asked who was with me. I was too afraid to get out of bed, so I didn't. The next day, I didn't capture anything unusual on my recording. When I told everyone in the house the next morning, no one else recalled having any unusual experiences that night. As I've mentioned before, I can't tell you with 100% confidence that I was completely awake when this experience happened, though I'm pretty sure that I was. But even if this was some kind of dream event, it doesn't mean it might not have been some kind of spirit contact or attachment, since it is widely believed that spirits or ghosts can communicate with us easier when we're asleep. So if it did turn out that I was sleeping, it wouldn't make the experience any less interesting to me. I was so very honored to have Rick and Daniel stop by. It was nice of them to let an old nerd feel knowledgeable and helpful while yakking away for hours. And I'm sorry I didn't get to meet Ryan. I did happen to hear that they earned and received an A on their research paper. Very well deserved, guys. I hope they stay in touch no matter what nerdly journeys they embark on this next year.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
I highly doubt that anyone listening to this podcast has missed hearing about the Charlie Challenge craze that has gone viral all over the internet, mainly among teenagers. From what I can tell, the roots of this viral challenge go back to 2008, and it has the same feel of the legend of Bloody Mary or similar games that have come before it. I'm only going to briefly mention that Charlie is supposed to be a Mexican demon, apparently, with a story behind it. If you know me, though, you know I roll my eyes at that. I don't believe that for a second. But you're supposed to round up 2 pencils, and you'd ideally have to have the old traditional hexagon pencils for this to work. You lay one of the pencils flat on top of a piece of paper that has yes and no written on opposite corners. When you balance the other pencil on top and in the center of the bottom pencil, you're supposed to follow a traditional script that starts out, Charlie, are you here or are you there? And as you can guess, if your friend Charlie is with you, the pencil will move toward yes or no. I do have to say that watching some of the many video compilations out there, I've seen several different variations of the game. Some of them just flat out silly, but nearly every one of them ends with screams and people running out of the room. Chaos. Some of them involve a scary noise or something happening in the background that ends up scaring the wits out of the sitters before they even get a response from the pencils. Those are the ones that cracked me up the most. I'm not going to say much about this next point because it's hot off the press breaking news as of the time I'm recording this, and I don't know how true it is. I'm sure right now you know more than I do as I'm recording this. But I'm hearing that it's possible that this was all a publicity stunt for an upcoming movie called The Gallows. And I'm not really sure what to think about that. Did they really cause all of the zillions of videos and all of the stir, or are they taking advantage of this moment? It's a little bit annoying. Were we tricked? If so, oh well, I'll just continue to roll my eyes like I did from the beginning. So anyway, I've had multiple people ask me if I'd tried it, and at the time I said no. I actually haven't put much energy or thought toward this whole phenomenon until today when I did a little bit of research. If you scroll far enough through the silliness, you can find several articles that seem fairly trustworthy. The overwhelming answer from most of these articles can be summed up in one word: gravity. I am so not a scientist, but apparently pencils being stacked in such a manner just can't stay put in such an unnatural position. Now, some of the participants in the videos used other writing utensils, some mismatched and some round. And those tended to be the clips that ended up being more silly anyway. So if you're wondering, yes, today I tried my own version of the Charlie challenge. I gathered the required 2 pencils with 6 sides each. I did not put out a piece of paper with answer choices, as the answer wouldn't have mattered to me anyway. I also didn't follow the goofy Charlie script. I simply placed the pencils and waited in silence for only 10 or 12 seconds. No movement that I could see. Then I gently waved my hand over the pencils a few times, and the pencil on top clearly made the same move that I saw on so many of the videos. I moved it back, waved my hand, and the pencil responded again. I then decided to simply ask if someone was present and if they could move the top pencil for me. This time I did not wave my hand. There was no response this time. I tried again, and no response again. Most of the videos I saw involved many people in the room, some moving around, all breathing, I'm assuming, talking, and who knows what all else. So it doesn't surprise me at all that movement, or even just charged energy in the room, would move enough air to disturb the pencils. And yes, maybe it's just gravity. Now, all that being said, some of the videos did tend to have interesting responses that were timed perfectly, or what seemed like perfectly, with the questions. Assuming no one was blowing or flat out hoaxing, some of them could be examples of legit paranormal activity. I don't doubt at all that something like this could be used as a spirit communication tool, just like the Ouija, or flashlights, or K2 meters, or dowsing rods, or even through knocks on the wall, which tends to be how spirits choose to communicate with me sometimes. But I'm cautiously skeptic about all of those spirit communication tools as well. But with such a crazy viral fad, I would not truly trust any of the video clips I saw today. I tried it, the pencil moved, I used my brain, experiment over. Have you tried the Charlie challenge? Did you come up to the same conclusion? I'd love to hear from you. And what do you think? Do you disagree with me? That's okay too. I want you to tell me all about it. It's time for some shout-outs, y'all. If I haven't already, I really need to thank Heatherlynn at Smudge-a-Bunny for always responding, retweeting, and keeping the discussion going on Facebook and Twitter. I also want to publicly thank Jeff, a new listener who recently found us on Apple's podcast app. Not only has he been in touch through email, but he's done one of the coolest things that a listener could do. He gave the gift of a great review on iTunes, Seriously, iTunes reviews are the best. Hint, hint. I want to thank Nick, Daniel, and Ryan for giving me something cool to talk about today. And lastly, I want to thank you for listening and for staying with me and for your patience in my absence recently. I hope to get back onto a regular schedule immediately. Peace out, y'all. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Seance Podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.